The winter of 1901, in northern Maine, 4 feet of snow buries a forest stacked with tens of thousands of stranded pine logs, timber that must move before spring or risk becoming worthless rot. With mills up to 50 miles away and horse teams dying by the dozen, the logging industry faces bankruptcy if the frozen harvest stays put. But in this desperate season, an untested machine will try what muscle and hoof could not. Could one invention really change the fate of an entire industry? Out in the deep woods, the men with horse teams faced a problem that muscle alone could not overcome. Horses, even the strongest, big Percherons and Clydesdales, were no match for the Maine winter. Their iron-spiked shoes still slipped on the ice. In 4 feet of snow, the animals sank to their bellies, harnesses tangled, legs twisting under the weight of the sleds. Some days, the snow swallowed them whole. A single misstep could snap a leg, and there was no rescue, just a bullet and a shallow grave in the woods. Camps kept a tally. 12 to 18 horses lost in a single season was common. Each one cost $100, a fortune for a logging company, equal to months of a man's wages, and more than $2,500 by today's standards. The numbers added up in blood and dollars. A big operation might be 30 or 50 miles from the nearest town. If a team died, there was no quick replacement. Men walked for hours to fetch help, but most times, the work just stopped. Timber piled up at the cut, but nothing moved out. Every dead horse meant lost money, wasted feed, wasted labor, and a growing risk that the spring thaw would turn the snowbound logs into a stranded, worthless mess. For the men in the camps, it was more than numbers. It was the sound of hooves slipping, the sight of a good animal going down, and the knowledge that the old ways were failing fast. Alvin, Orlando Lombard, was not a man of blueprints and theory. Born in Waterville, Maine, he learned the world through metal, steam, and the stubborn realities of work. By the turn of the century, he had spent decades as a machinist and blacksmith, repairing and building whatever the mills or the woods demanded. He watched the horses fail year after year. He saw the waste, the broken animals, the men stranded in snowdrifts with nothing but a shovel and a hope that spring wouldn't come too soon. Lombard's answer came not from a textbook, but from the way snowshoes spread a man's weight so he could walk where boots would sink. If animals bogged down because their hooves pressed too deep, why not build a machine that floated? He started with a wooden model, front runners like sleds, and at the back, a set of endless tracks, each link studded with cleats to grip the snow. The idea was simple: distribute the weight, let the machine crawl rather than roll. That was the breakthrough. In November 1900, Lombard filed for a U.S. patent. The application described a vehicle adapted to move upon snow and ice without slipping, laying out the core principle: spread the load across a broad surface, just like a snowshoe. The patent was granted on May 21, 1901, U.S. Patent number 674,737. With it, Lombard didn't just protect his invention. He put the solution to winter's deadlock into the hands of the logging industry. The next step was to build it full scale and see if steel and steam could do what muscle and hooves could not. Steam was the heart of Lombard's machine. A vertical boiler set mid-frame burned wood or coal to bring water to a rolling boil, building pressure up to 200 pounds per square inch. That pressure drove 2 vertical pistons, each linked by a heavy crankshaft to the tracks behind. The piston's back and forth motion turned the shaft, which in turn powered the endless chain tracks, one for each side, each about 5 feet wide. The tracks themselves were a marvel, steel links fitted with cleats or lags that bit into snow and ice. Unlike wheels that spun and sank, these tracks spread the hauler's 18,000-pound empty weight across a broad surface. Ground pressure dropped to just a few pounds per square inch, less than the foot of a man in snowshoes. The hauler, 30 feet long and 10 feet wide, crawled forward, at a steady 4.5 miles per hour, dragging a line of loaded sleds behind. The front of the machine rode on a pair of long skis, 10 feet from tip to tail, pivoting on a central pin. Steering came from a lever in the operator's hands, shifting the angle of the skis to guide the bulk of the hauler. The real breakthrough lay in the track geometry. Each track could flex and oscillate over bumps and drifts, always keeping maximum contact with the snow. The steel cleats gripped, the weight floated, and for the first time, a machine could cross the winter woods without bogging down. But the same power that made this possible, steam at high pressure, was always waiting to punish any mistake in the firebox or boiler. Pressure management wasn't a detail, it was survival. Night after night, deep in the Maine woods, crews stepped out into the darkness with axes, lanterns, and water carts. The ice road wasn't just a path, it was a living project, built and rebuilt every evening. Men chopped holes through lake ice, filled barrels, and hauled water by sled to the logging lanes. By midnight, teams worked in bitter cold, spreading water over packed snow that froze into a mirror-smooth track by dawn. This nightly flooding turned rough trails into icy highways, hard, fast, and slick enough that a Lombard hauler could tow a train of loaded sleds where horses would have floundered. Each sled in the train stretched 30 feet, built from thick oak planks and steel runners, designed to carry 10 or 15 tons of green pine or spruce. Chained together in lines of 10, 20, sometimes even more, they formed a rolling freight line that could move as much as 100,000 board feet in a single run. But everything depended on the road. A rough patch, one spot where the ice broke or the snow drifted too thick, could snap a chain or shatter a sled, wasting a day's work. That's why patrolmen walked the routes, shoveling, patching, and watching for weak spots, while operators and conductors kept a close eye on the train's rhythm. The pay reflected the risk and skill involved. Operators and firemen earned double or triple the wages of a camp laborer. Their judgment kept the hauler moving and the logs flowing. One wrong move could stall the train, wreck the road, or bring disaster to the crew. Each night's labor on the ice road was an investment, one that paid off only if the logs reached the river before the thaw. On March 3, 1907, the stillness over Lake Escanaba shattered. The Lombard hauler's relief valve began to scream, a noise every camp knew meant trouble. In the next instant, the boiler ruptured under 200 pounds of steam pressure. Steel split apart with a violence no man could outrun. Operator Charles Reed died instantly, thrown from the cab amid flying shrapnel and scalding vapor. Fireman was hurled clear, his back broken, landing yards away on the frozen lake. Bits of the machine scattered across the ice, mingling with splintered sleds and spilled timber. For the men who heard the blast, there was no time for shock, just the cold fact that a hauler could kill as quickly as it could move logs. Companies brought in a replacement within days. The logs still had to move, and the work went on. If you've got family stories from logging, rail, mills, or old steam equipment, subscribe and add what you know. Stories from the camps still echo with the names of men who mastered the Lombard. Big Jack Morrison once crawled out onto the tracks with a sledgehammer, clearing a jam in the middle of a blizzard, while the boiler hissed and the sled train waited behind him. Henry Bjornson, it was said, could sense a thrown chain or a cracked cleat by the shift in the engine's song, and he would pull back the throttle before anyone else even noticed trouble. Thomas Kearney, remembered by his granddaughter, worked through a storm so fierce the snow stung like needles, muttering, "If the boiler sings, the snow will bite." Their skills kept the hauler moving when others would have stopped, but even legends couldn't hold back change forever. By the 1930s, diesel and gasoline engines took over, lighter, faster, no firemen needed. Steam haulers were left to rust where the woods swallowed them up. If you remember stories around machines like these, or the men who ran them, Subscribe and tell us what you remember in the comments. Every modern track-driven machine owes its existence to that first Maine winter, proof that necessity still drives real invention. As climate and terrain keep testing our limits, the will to adapt remains our truest engine. The next breakthrough could be waiting right where the road ends. Share your stories below.